Welcome to Like a Bomb, a podcast about powerful women from the past and present. Not fragile like a flower.
Fragile like a bomb.
Cool. So this should be the first episode of Like a Bomb. This will be fun. I'm Bailey.
Mom? My real name is Jill.
Or Mom, as I may call you.
Yes, I am Jill.
Or Mommy or whatever.
I will be some mom word. Hopefully it's a good word and not a no-no word.
Yes, we're going to avoid those. And then so the plan is, at the time of release of this episode, it will be the unfortunate 2-year anniversary of Roe v. Wade being overturned. So that's why we're going to do our inaugural episode that day, this day. Time's irrelevant when you're recording.
I mean, space is irrelevant. I'm in a closet.
Fair enough. I'm in my office at the moment.
There's a weird pause there, like you're scared that you're
Big space difference.
Yes.
We got weird pauses.
That's okay.
So we got my space tapestry. You can see.
I
No one
can
else
see
can.
the space.
I'm not going to do video yet.
No. My shirt says weirdo.
Well, I mean, my shirt I chose today. It's Women's History is Important, Relevant, Empowering American History. Quite at its finest, thanks to my university.
Well, all those are dirty.
But yeah, some fun things on the note. So we're going to be talking, obviously, about different women. We'll get to mine in a moment, but a little bit of personal fun things at the beginning. So Alex got a cat recently.
What?
He adopted a cat 2 nights ago.
A cat or a kitten? Like an old cat? Like an old lady cat?
Like a 3 to 5-year-old cat, according to the vet. He took her to the
Wow.
vet Saturday morning, and because him being him and being funny is like, oh, she trespassed. So the cat's name is Felony. Her middle name is 34.
Am I supposed to understand the 34?
You don't understand why 34.
I'm old.
Trump has 34 felonies.
I do know that. And 2 impeachments.
Yeah, let's see. You told me about your cute little book. You want to talk more about your book?
My beautiful velvet-covered magic book from my beautiful friend Christine. Shout out. I miss you already. But it is being good use. It is all the ideas I have for stories. Of course, not in order because my brain doesn't work in order. But I did particularly pick my topic for today, knowing that we were coming out on this time of year when we were going to do our first recording. So I am very timely for once in my life.
Mine is based off of being our pilot episode. Also, you might want to turn your camera off. You're a little cutting through. Save your bandwidth a little.
Sorry. No.
So we can hear you clearly. Yeah, no. In other news that besides the release of this episode being the 2-year Roe v. Wade overturn, some Southern Baptist convention recently has been saying how, God, what was it? Did they say something about how they don't want women to be pastors anymore? But they're also very anti-IVF. It's all Southern hot mess.
But Southern Baptists already believe that their women should not have status in church. That's why I couldn't get married by my youth counselor when I was getting married to your dad.
Dang, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no.
I think they're just reinforcing it, but I know it definitely...
Yep, that's your great-grandmother said no because, well, she didn't say all this, but Grammy said in her eyes I wouldn't be married because the women can't hold place in the church in the Southern Baptist belief, and that family is all Southern Baptist. Hi, family! Love you, miss ya.
The only one listening to it will probably be Grammy.
Dave might. Ty would.
I don't know. We'll see. If not, a little hi.
Hi, family.
Yeah, try not to air any family drama.
Yeah. No, that's not drama. That's
But yeah,
facts.
anyways, we are still going to be on the internet soon enough. Let's see. We can... Yep, back to the IVF thing. They don't believe in IVF, and of course, this most likely stems from the fact that there was the recent debacle this year of the Alabama courts being like, no, IVF, like killing those embryos is murder. So all the IVF clinics briefly shut down. And then, what was it? Governor Kay Ivey did another something collective of everyone to be like, actually, no, it's fine because we want more people to actually have babies, which is the whole thing. They just want people to have babies.
Yes, more and more babies.
IVF is also very expensive.
Yes, very expensive.
Yeah. And it hasn't been assumed already. Politics is very deeply ingrained in so many things, so yes, this podcast will involve politics.
Secretly, too.
But yeah, I don't think not much else updates. It's been a pretty chill weekend. I'm just sleeping. New cat in our friend group we get to go meet. Her face looks so much like Socks. It's really cute and it
Aw.
makes me really sad seeing it.
Finn tried to do this like
yeah,
weird
but
flip. Sorry. Finn tried to do like this flippy
Mhm.
thing off of the mantle today onto the cat tree because he wanted to be petted, and it was like Brownie flashbacks of doing crazy things on the mantle, and I got sad and I said he was just like Brownie, and it was sad.
Cats are funny little babies.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's all I got. I don't know. My back hurts.
You
and
okay?
I would just want to be moved because I'm sitting in a closet.
Yeah, you'll be moved soon. And then we can be updated like, look, you finally moved in.
Yes.
Well, yeah, you want to start first or me? You got any warnings for your person?
Yes, I do discuss female reproduction and lack thereof, and
Yeah.
different types of contraceptives. That's and eugenics, which is a hot topic. Not today, probably.
Lovely.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm ready to listen whenever, and if I have any questions, you want me to wait till the end or stop you in the middle?
Stop me in the middle. I got 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me moving papers? 4. I even have fun facts as we
A little
go.
bit. I don't know how much the mic's picking up.
I can.
Wow, exciting.
Well-
I'll add my input as we go then.
So, because I'm a math teacher, I linearly did my notes. So it's like a timeline within a story. So, are you ready?
I just did the chaotic way, I guess.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I'm too old for that. Margaret Sanger, which is the pioneer of women's birth control and the founder of the American birth control movement. A lot of cases.
Important stuff.
Yes, a lot of the cases that she was involved in, partly because she was arrested, are actually precedent cases they used in Roe versus Wade. So basically, I'm going to start with a quote because I like quotes and I think it's impactful. Enforced motherhood is the most complete denial of a woman's right to life and liberty. Margaret Sanger. So, a little bit about her background is she comes from a really big family. There was 11 kids in her family. She was the sixth.
So many.
Her mom was pregnant 18 times. 18 and had 11 kids. And she was born, so Margaret
when was she born?
In 1879.
Yeah, example of her being the woman pioneering birth control.
Yes.
And child mortality rates.
Yes. So she was born in Corning, New York. She was the 6th of 11 children. So she comes from an Irish Catholic working class family. We're desperately poor, some struggling for food here and there. Her father was a stonemason, and everything I read, he's a free thinker and is the one who taught Margaret to defy authority and push through. Mother, on the other hand, was a very much devout Catholic, but had a very hard work ethic. But she died at a very early age. She died when she was about 49, 50 from TB. Margaret, that's kind of like her spearhead where Margaret got her gusto to go and say, my mom was sick. My mom wouldn't have been so sick and weak if had she not been pregnant 18 times and gone through 11 births. This isn't fair. Women shouldn't have to be forced to have children. So that's kind of where she got her first. This is something I really want to look into. And then she, was in grade school and they didn't have the money. And so her teachers actually chipped in and sent her to boarding school. So she went to a couple of different boarding schools, but she had to pull out to come take care of her mom before she passed. So she actually contracted TB and had TB on and off bouts throughout the rest of her life. However, because...
Dang, that's a pretty bad disease.
Yeah, and this is the 1900s now. So she did actually end up going to get her nursing's degree. She was a practical nurse. She graduated with that degree she got from the White Plains Hospital in Westchester, New York in 1902. And the same time, she met and married her first husband, who was William Sanger. He was an architect and a painter, and they had 3 children. So she's, early life. She's married. She's having some kids, and the next thing, and I've read this in so many articles, which we'll have definitely the links to the articles and everything, that in 1902 and 1903, she had like this big catalyst that happened when Havelock Ellis, who was a European, and he published studies in the psychology of sex. And apparently that was an eye-opening thing for her. I tried to look into it, but I tried to Google it and pull up stuff. I never could find the dates that they're saying that this was published. So I didn't look too much into it because I wasn't sure if that seemed to be different editions. The internet. It's a rabbit hole. But also,
yeah,
in the same time, and this is going to resurface later, I will say there's a lot of accomplishments that is the reason I am doing this story, because we would not have our reproductive freedoms that we do have had this woman fought for them. With that being said, there are some kind of unjust things that she kind of did in the pursuit of this one goal of getting safe and effective birth control to the masses. She did support the eugenics movement. Everything I've read, she used it in a way to push her agenda. However, in the 1902 and 1903 time, Theodore Roosevelt publicly said, as a eugenist, that it was race suicide for women of white, Protestant, Anglo-Saxon women to use birth control.
So they were trying to give out to the people of color and the other non-desirables.
Yes, and that's the eugenics movement. For anybody who did not grow up knowing anything about this, basically stopped legally, was supposed to stop a little before and I'll talk about that later a little bit, before I was born. So mid-70s, I think, was the official law that said you can't do this. However, eugenics was a government-sanctioned belief and policy. There are actually policies in place that said, yes, you can sterilize what you deem to be the unfit. And
I'm not surprised.
So
every country has its problems, and the U.S. has done some pretty bad things.
There are some questions of, is it still out there? I'm not to have no proof that it is still currently happening. However, I don't know what happens in the darkest regions of the world, so I can't officially say that it is not happening. And I do have a little bit, I think I talk about it a little bit more later. I don't want to focus on that, but I did want to mention that I want to focus on the fact that she is the reason that we have birth control, which, by the way, this is crazy. This is insane. The Supreme Court ruled that they made birth control legal for unmarried people. Birth control was illegal for unmarried people before 1972.
Why?
That's why I'm doing this case.
I guess, it was still big, don't have premarital sex back then.
Yes.
But still, people did it.
Yes. Well, it was legalized because I am now jumping places.
Notes are hard.
Somewhere in here. Yeah, I'll have to get back to that. Somewhere in here, I have I think, where it became legal for married couples. I don't know. There's a lot of notes. But there was a lot of things that were very illegal as Margaret is coming into the world. So in 1873, there was what was called the Comstock Act. So it made it illegal for the Postal Service to distribute what were considered obscene pamphlets or writings or objects or anything. And this was considered birth control information, contraceptive devices, anything about abortion, of course, you couldn't even talk about it. Doctors couldn't even talk about it. Like, they couldn't talk about it with their patients. They couldn't say, hey, you know what?
Medical
Again,
care.
skipping around. In like the early 1910s, a doctor could not discuss birth control with patients. An example of advice was, tell Jack to go sleep on the roof. Not sure why the roof is the place. I'm sure there's somewhere else. Jack, go sleep on the roof. Yeah, I'm not really sure why he needs to sleep on the roof, but that was an example that was given. So Margaret's married. She's maybe having some kids. In 1911, and I know about this because I'm all about true crime, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire happened and 146 women died. Basically because the exits were blocked because the managers didn't want anybody to secretly take breaks.
Yeah, this is a very well-known case.
Yes, very well. And I remember seeing things about it when I was a small child because cable was a thing.
Yeah.
The singers were very passionate and felt that things really needed to change. So they got involved and helped. And a lot of things did change. Labor laws changed. Fire safety in New York changed. But they were very outright just enraged. So they fought for workers' rights. Margaret saved 119 kids during the Violet textile mill strikes. I feel like I need to look into that because I didn't know about a violent textile mill strike. But she took the kids that were being involved in the strikes and she found them temporary homes. She was actually in danger by doing that, but still did it because she felt that was the right thing to do. In the same time, they joined the Socialist Party. So I'm going to kind of jump over that because it's not something. If you're going to get enraged at the fact that they joined the Socialist Party, then you're in the wrong podcast. Just heads up.
Very much so.
But they did it because at the time they felt like, hey, we need to help the people who don't have our means. We need to help the people that, they did it in a very good place. And then, well, she became a nurse because she is a nurse. She's got her schooling and stuff. So she starts being an obstetric visiting nurse, and she started doing that in the Lower East Side of New York City. Okay, so mainly working with very low-income families and women, and she helped women, more or less, her job was helping women, they did DIY abortions. So,
boy, those can be really damaging.
Yes, so everything I read, they kept saying the same cost, that they could get, though it was still a sketchy procedure. A safer version was they had to pay $5 to get an abortion. And a lot of these people didn't have the $5. I did not, and I should have looked up the inflation rate of what $5 was then.
Hey, let me look it up. $5 in what year?
1912.
What's $5 what year?
1912.
1912 to now. This is the benefit of
Google.
What are you going to tell me the number? That's $162 today. That's a lot of money just to drop. It's not that bad.
Especially if you were barely working paycheck to paycheck to keep food and a house over your head,
Like, yeah, that's a lot of food, and
that's a lot of food.
Doesn't really do much of anything for today other than like food and gas.
That's probably enough food to feed me for 3 months.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's lots of good things, eggs and whatnot. Easy.
Some people can't eat eggs. It's a sad world for us people.
I know. You're one of them now.
I know. But so that was basically what she was doing. She was caring for women who were struggling from either just having childbirth, and maybe that didn't go well because childbirth was dangerous. Childbirth is still dangerous, even with all the technology and healthcare that we have.
Yeah, it's extremely scary too.
Yes, it is. Things break, blood happens. It's, yeah. I think that's one of the things I sent your sister, your brother. You have a brother. Your sister, that was in her birth story this year, and then blood was just shooting out. So, but you still didn't want to come out. That was part of the birth story part that I told her this year. And she said she did it for the lore.
I'm looking forward to my birthday this year.
Well,
my God.
That's what she said. So I don't know what lore, because
She's special.
I don't know who she's telling this story to unless she's cutting and pasting and just showing it to everybody she knows. Which, well, that's
She's a
information.
cryptid. She just wants to be a cryptid. I don't know what to tell you.
It's possible. I mean, she did. Wow, that brings weird. So part of the birth story was that. So long story short, started birth Friday morning and went back Sunday night. Had her Monday afternoon. We took Mothman. We took the movie Mothman to the hospital so I could watch it while I was there. Because they did a big blockbuster Mothman movie. And when I was in the hospital with you, I watched the Blair Witch. I think I did tell her that this year. Yeah, I did tell her that. It was part of her birth story this year.
The Mothman?
That took that movie to watch it. Your birth story, we watched the Blair Witch Project. Is that what it's called? I think that's what it's called. When I was in the hospital with you.
I don't know.
That's what me and your dad, or maybe I just watched it. I don't know where he was. He may have been still unconscious. Not sure.
He was having a seizure at one point.
He was unconscious. He had a seizure and then stayed unconscious.
I know. I've heard the stories.
Childbirth is hurtful to all people involved. So, with all that being said,
yeah, clearly,
she was reinforced the dangers of multiple births, the dangers of choosing to not have those children, but not having the birth control to prevent the pregnancy, but to change, to do something about it after the pregnancy. And she was like outraged. And so she actually left nursing. So she left nursing because she just wanted to truly find secure access to safe and effective birth control for women that needed it. And again, let me preface, this is a white woman of some means, not an exceptional amount of means yet based on this first husband. The second husband has more means. But she did have that privileges. We're in the, 1913-ish area. Women got the right to vote. White women got the right to vote in 1920. So women can't even vote. So, she's fighting for...
I like how man learned how to fly before we got birth control and the right to vote.
Yes. And that was just white women's right to vote. So
that's true. It was just anyone's women.
Yeah. So with all that, and then, so in her fight for birth control, she started violating those Comstock rules. Act. I mean, it's a rule, but it's also an act officially. And she published a 12-part article that was called What Every Girl Should Know. And I actually found the PDF, so we can add that too. So,
okay. We can add little different links.
Yeah. So I thought that would be cool because it is done and it's broken up. So it's broken into 12 parts. So it has in some of the chapters, and I'm just going to read the name of the chapters. I'm not going to read the name of the parts because some of the chapters have parts. So there's, of course, the intro. There's what's called girlhood, puberty, sexual impulse, reproduction, some of the consequences of ignorance and silence, and finally, menopause. So pretty much all the things that a woman goes through.
Interesting section.
I thought the one of some of the consequences of ignorance and silence, that is about the STIs. And if you're old school like me, you know them as STDs. Because that is our ignorance and silence. Hey, I think it was like syphilis was like one of the parts underneath, because that was like a more common thing that people didn't even know they had. But I did find the PDF, and it is out there in the world for free. And of course, this violated it, and it was illegal to, have these articles out there in the world. But there's no legal, I didn't find anything that she got legal ramifications right then and there, okay? She continued in 1914. She issued a short-lived magazine called The Woman Rebel, which I want to have that as my title. Can that be like my superhero name, The Woman Rebel?
Sure, we'll make a little cartoon super-powered.
I have capes.
Superwoman.
I mean, I have capes, so we can make this happen.
Make your OC, your original character.
Yep. So,
go to a Comic-Con.
So the magazine was about her views of family limitation, And this is where she coined the phrase birth control. She is the official person who has credit for coining the flav. The phrase birth control. Could somebody have said it before them? Yes. 2 people invented calculus. One did it publicly before the other one did, but she is the one who has credit for it. And she provided women with info and contraceptives, which is a big no-no in the world. So in 1915, she was actually indicted for sending diaphragms through the mail. But in 1916, the charges were dropped. And this is for a very sad reason for why the belief is that the charges were dropped. It was possibly due to one of her daughters died in 1915 at the age of 5 from pneumonia. And she was a very public, none of this was she doing quietly. She wasn't one of those women who was afraid to speak out. No, she was speaking it out. She was sending these things out in the mail. She was very vocal and everybody knew what she was saying. And the belief is that by public outcry, they dropped the charges. But here's some fun facts that I have for you. Some diaphragm information.
Wow.
So, and if you don't know what a diaphragm is, Google it on your own time. If you're a small child, please don't Google it. You may be disturbed. Also, where are your parents?
This is more adult-based content, especially with some of the things that happen with the women we talk about.
Yes.
This is a parent-to-parent decision podcast.
Yes. Y'all would have not been allowed before 11 or 12, maybe? Maybe that would have been too early.
Yeah, it's like a PG-13 podcast.
Yes. I feel like I would have waited until you going through puberty. At least.
Yeah.
However, y'all gave your friends a disclaimer that I cuss a lot and listen to scary music. But the diaphragm. The history of the diaphragm.
I mean, I do the same now. Ow.
The official diaphragm was a European invention in 1842. It was deemed effective but expensive, and women found it embarrassing to use. So again, if you want to Google away. However, I have ancient history facts. So before the actual diaphragm, the official one, there were DIY barriers. So the ancient Indians and Egyptians used poop of crocodiles and elephants because and this is actually believed that it actually might have worked because apparently it messes with the pH and would have killed sperm. I don't know. I do not want to play with crocodile poop and sperm and see if it works.
Nope, no thank you.
Yep. In Africa, they made plugs out of grass or cloth, which I'm sure I guess grass. I don't know. I guess that's easy to come by. Jewish women attached a string to a sea sponge wrapped in silk, and it was actually deemed mildly effective and still used today. And this one I actually weirdly remember, but I don't remember this information in the year that it was a thing because, well, I was only 8. So in 1985, a Harvard researcher discovered that soda kills some sperm in a test tube and that Diet Coke was the most effective. I actually remember that, but I know...
No, I'm sorry. I think it's Mountain Dew that's the most effective now.
Probably. That stuff's just toxic no matter what.
Yep. Aren't you glad I don't like it anymore?
The idea of it just makes me yuck. Okay. We are up to 1915. She has now been released of charges, but she's also dealing with the death of her child, which I can't even imagine losing one of you monsters at 5.
Yeah. No.
So between 1916 and 1917, she opened the first U.S. birth control clinic in Brooklyn. She was promptly arrested and charged with a public nuisance. She actually served 30 days in jail. Luckily, her arrest, legal problems, and her legal appeals increased public support in her favor, and the birth control movement actually got some footing and became more of a just not a one-person show. Kind of, she had accomplices at this point. And this led to federal courts to grant doctors.
That's good. Yeah. More than just one. Hard to...
Yes. Well, she has quite a few as she goes. Some she branched off from, and there are possibilities for future stuff that I talk about. why I'm not mentioning them. But the public support led to federal courts to grant doctors the right to advise women about birth control methods. Mind you, this is married women that they are actually discussing this with. And this is people who can afford to go see a doctor. So as far as public appeals go, 1908 People versus Sanger, the New York Court of Appeals reversed Sanger's conviction. So her conviction from sending her diaphragms through the mail, and her serving her arrest for opening the clinic. And with that, North Carolina, no, New York. The ruling was that New York's restriction of distributing of birth control is against a woman's civil liberty by forcing women to conceive and birth more kids than they want to. So this is one of the first cases.
There we go. Let's all move to New York.
Yep, this is one of the first cases that was stepping stones for the future of female reproductive rights. Science 2020 and everything. And of course, at 1920, now white women can vote. The 19th Amendment. In 1921, she founded the American Birth Control League, which became the future Planned Parenthood Federation, and she was the president of that to 1928. So, and as far as that goes, that is a tricky alliance. Planned Parenthood has come out and publicly said, this is our founder, this is the woman who has done all of these X, Y, and Z things. However, we do not agree with, and we do have strong opposing her beliefs in eugenics and some other things that she did in her past. Planned Parenthood has actually publicly come out and said, we do thank you so much. We're so grateful for all that she has done. However, here are some of the things that are also true about her history, and we want to make sure that you understand this is not what we believe as well. So they actually have done that, and you can look that up as well.
Planned Parenthood's good.
Yeah, you can look that up. They have definitely been they actually renamed a facility that was named after her. They even changed the name of that recently. So she traveled to Europe to study the birth control issue there. I think she just wanted to go to Europe. She did marry a second husband.
To each their own, traveling.
Yes. However, let's be honest. The European view of a lot of things is, depending on what part of history, is a little more free thinker as far as some things of women's rights, depending on what part of Europe as well. And I learned something that I thought was...
Yeah, as in more Western is a little bit more advanced than us in a lot of things, historically.
Yes. So I will say, I thought this was crazy, going back and thinking of all the movies I've seen in my life, that the chastity belt actually didn't become a popular thing until the 1800s, whereas you see it in medieval movies and books and stories. I mean, just a little bit of...
That's funny.
I mean, that it makes it completely historically inaccurate when I go back and I watch Robin Hood Men in Tights and there is a chastity belt, and I'm like, but you're mid-age? Research better, guys.
Hey, it's movies. Logic need not apply.
Well, that movie, there is no logic. So she married her second husband, who was an oil magnate. Definitely increased her prominence as far as means to continue her fight.
By a lot.
Yes. So when she makes friends with some wealthy people, she teams up with, and we'll get there. Okay. So in 1923, the first legal birth control clinic in the U.S. is opened and stays open, and it is the Clinical Research Bureau. Its first purpose was to give out contraceptives, and it was a research lab. They were trying... Margaret's goal was to find this magic birth control pill. Like, that was her goal. That's what she talks about, and it's called...
Yeah, we get there eventually.
Yes. She calls it the magic pill. She wanted something that was easy, affordable, and safe. I don't know if it's a magic pill. So they did do research here, and it later became the country's main lab for studying of contraceptives. I would love to see some of the things they're testing and how they're testing them. Okay, moving on. In 1936, the Comstock Act was reinterpreted and found to violate the U.S. Constitution because you can distribute your medical... Basically allowed doctors to import and prescribe contraceptives. giving a little bit more freedom to doctors, giving a little bit more freedom to, people who had access. Wow, we're in the 30s, man. We made it through the Great Depression. So the American Medical...
We're making it to it.
Yeah. Well, we're in the Depression. We got a couple more years. The American Medical Association recognized birth control as an integral part of medical practice and education, which means that doctors were being a little bit more educated on the practices, which gave them more information to inform their patients, which again, the patients had to afford to be able to see them. She did some traveling in Asia, mainly to India and Japan with birth control campaign. And I'm going to elaborate on this. What I'm about to say, I'm going to elaborate more on a future episode. But in 1951, she met Gregory Pincus, and he was a human reproductive expert willing to help research and create the magic birth control pill. Okay. She partnered with heiress Catherine McCormick, and that is a very big name, millions, lots of money, to help fund the research. Again, I don't want to go too much into their role.
That's good. Money gets things done.
Yes, money does. Money does get a lot of things done. And so they threw some money in, some other people threw some money in, another person gets involved. They do some kind of sketchy things, and then they have a birth control pill. To get that birth control pill, they did some really sketchy things, and I will address those in the future. But they do actually get FDA approval in 1960 for the very first birth control pill. Since that first pill, the hormone levels have been adjusted, and they are a little bit more safe than they were then. In 1965, when Margaret was 81 years old, the Supreme Court case, Griswold, I don't know why I was saying Gills, Griswold versus Connecticut, ruled that private use of contraceptives was a constitutional right, and this is, again, another stepping stone for the future cases to come. So, as far as eugenics goes, I do want to address that again. It is not completely clear what her full involvement was and to what degree she supported it. However, she did come out and state that she believes that birth control should be given and should help eliminate pregnancies of the unfit. There are various definitions throughout the movement and just in media and history of what that defined. Based on everything I have read, it was more of a poverty situation where people who couldn't afford more kids, that it should be an option, sterilization and those kind of things. But I am not discrediting that she was a part of the movement and did support eugenics to an extent. So I'm going to leave her story on a credit quote to her is a woman's right to control her body is central to her human rights. Every woman should have the right to choose when or whether to have children, and every child should be wanted and loved. And I have more fun facts if you want them.
That was a good quote, minus the fact of the eugenics.
Yeah, but I don't want to skate over who her things were. But she did.
You can't.
She did do an amazing forward step for our reproductive rights. Multiple cases that because of her.
We can't ignore her achievement.
So that I did feel like when we're coming at that 2-year reversal. But I do have a couple more fun facts, and then I will let you tell your story. Oh, and 3.
Woo!
You ready? 3000 BCE. I have to remember to add that E now. Ancient societies made condoms from animal and fish bladders and intestines. Makes sense. Not till 1855
I've heard of this.
Was the first rubber condom produced. All right, let's see.
That's a really long time of using animal products.
Yep. But easy to come by, I guess. If you have animals to cut up, I'm hoping they're not cutting up animals just for those parts.
I think they just had them
slaughterhouses.
People farming and eating.
Yeah, plus there's slaughterhouses.
Well, side job of here's a condom, here you go.
I don't know. Okay, the last one, because I've told you some.
Look at history books.
Yes. the other ones I've told throughout the story. The next one seems logical, but concerning. So, of course, we know the Great Depression was 1929 to like 1939. Some say 1940, and most say 1939. But then again, we entered World War II in 1941, so we got a boom to our economy when we did all the wars. Anyhow, that's completely digressing. Lysol at the time was advertised as a douche, and that's a weird word for me to say publicly and to my daughter.
Oh, okay.
To sidestep the Comstock Act at the time that was in place, birth control products were marketed as feminine hygiene products. So Lysol, a huge, strong disinfectant, could kill living things. Lysol soap.
It does.
Yep, Lysol soap was the best-selling soap during the Great Depression, and it was mainly used as birth control. Some women, according to this, some women reportedly died from using the soap. I couldn't find anything else about that.
That's a really bad way to go.
I know. I couldn't find anything else more about it. I mean, I looked, but I didn't look too hard because then, I couldn't. So
yeah, personal search history. Don't want to dive too deep.
Yes. So by the way, if I die before Grammy, you might want to grab my computer because I don't think she realizes how much true crime.
I'll clear your search history.
So, but that is the story of the pioneer of the U.S. birth control and birth control pill, Margaret Sanger.
Wow, that's a wild, rocky story.
Yeah.
Jeez.
That's the stuff.
Mine is not as dark. Mine's also a very common known figurehead. I wanted to pick her because there's more news in her story. Do you have any other items you want on your story before we go?
Nope, I think I covered all my Post-it notes and little fun facts.
Wow, I have a Google Doc, a bunch of articles kind of copy and pasted and a mess into this. So let's pull that up and hopefully not blind myself because it's bright. So my person is Amelia Earhart. Because also thinking after the fact, it's kind of funny that I want her to be my first person because, the first episode's usually the pilot and I have the pilot. So it was not intentional to make that kind of joke, but it works. But as I said, there's been recent things in the past year or so of having possibly found her plane and like her bones and whatnot and possibly in the past. So we're going to just go off general.
How if I missed that in the news?
I don't know. You'll find out momentarily enough soon.
I'm here.
So I'm going to go a little bit of her biography and then some of her achievements, some of her quotes, and then go into the found plane claim and then the bones claim of possibly having found those. Amelia Earhart, when she was 10, saw her first plane at the state fair, and she was not that impressed. It was a thing of rusty wire and wood and looked not at all interesting. She dismissively said. It wasn't until she attended a stunt flying expedition almost a decade later that she became seriously interested in aviation. A pilot spotted Earhart and her friend, who were watching from an isolated clearing, and dove at them. I'm sure he said to himself, "Watch me make them scamper," she exclaimed. Earhart felt a mixture of fear and pleasure and stood her ground. As the plane swooped by, something inside her awakened, and she didn't understand at the time, but it made her very excited to fly soon enough. Come 1920, pilot Frank Cox gave her a ride that would forever change her life, and she knew she had to fly. And although her convictions were strong, there were lots of obstacles in the way, especially financial and prejudice as a woman.
Yeah.
Despite this, she was very much a tomboy, climbing trees, hunting rats with a .22 rifle and all sorts of crazy other things. But she kept a scrapbook of newspaper clippings about successful women in predominantly male-oriented fields, including film direction and production, law, advertising, management, and mechanical engineering. Much like me with my engineering. And after she graduated Hyde Park High School in 1915, she attended, I'm going to butcher this, Ogontz? A girls' finishing school in the suburbs of Philadelphia. She left in the middle of her second year to work as a nurse's aide in the military hospital in Canada during World War I. Then she attended colleges and later became a social work at Denison House.
Yeah,
she took her first flying lesson January 3rd. Yeah, 1921.
I didn't know she was a social worker.
6 months she managed to save enough money to buy her first plane. Can you imagine 6 months buying enough money to buy a plane?
Yeah.
Flying lessons alone are expensive.
So, on a social worker
Yeah.
salary? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I know they make more money than I do, but they don't make that much more money than I do. Wow. Impressive.
You know, things were different back in the early 1900s.
They were.
So her plane that she bought was a secondhand Kinner Airster, and it was a two-seater biplane painted bright yellow.
No.
She nicknamed it the Canary. And she used it to set her first woman's record by rising it to an altitude of 14,000 feet. And so those are for her big achievements. And a lot of this is going to be just kind of from the article I have. I didn't have as much nice writing into my own like you did.
Well,
And then one afternoon, come April 1928, a phone call came for Earhart at work. And after hearing that it was important, she relented, though she thought it was a prank. And it wasn't until the caller supplied excellent references that she realized the man was serious. Don't know what he was serious about. Doesn't tell you much in those sentences. And it was, how would you like to be the first woman to fly the Atlantic? And of course, she promptly replied yes. She was excited. Who that call was made by? It doesn't say. This is just reported by an interview around that time.
Well, if somebody's, stranger danger would be the first thing that popped into my head, but there wasn't stranger danger back then.
As much in the same way. She was also pretty tough, as she demonstrated.
Yes, she could take one of her dead rats and hit him upside the head.
And so she was asked to join pilot Wilmer Bill Stoltz and co-pilot mechanic Lewis E. Slim Gordon. And the team left Trepassey Harbor, Newfoundland, in a Fokker F-7 named Friendship on June 17, 1928. And they arrived at Buryport, Wales, approximately 21 hours later. Their landmark flight made headlines worldwide because 3 pilots had died within the year trying to be the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. Now that is some pretty impressive thing of hey, I heard you know how to fly. You want to do this big thing that you know you can die?
Yeah, so that's why I keep telling you have to stay on this planet.
You know, with my back and things, I'm probably not going to be an astronaut at this rate.
Well, I still have to say you have to remain on this
But,
planet. It's my only requirement.
What about flying?
Well, you have to stay in this atmosphere. Yeah.
Okay, I see. Well, when they returned back to the US, they were greeted with a ticker tape parade in New York and a reception held by President Calvin Coolidge at the White House.
Do you know what ticker tape is?
From then on, Earhart's life revolved around flying. She placed third at the Cleveland Women's Air Derby, later nicknamed the Powder Puff Derby. Rather sexist.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, trying to make it a little different.
Well, that's the Powder Puff games that I played.
As fate would have it, George Putnam entered her life. I played Powder Puff, but I got a concussion before I could actually play the game.
Yeah, I did play. We had to play flag, though.
It's still like, oh, you're just a little girl. Here's your own little derby.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so, yeah. And so George Putnam entered her life then, and the two developed a friendship during preparation for the Atlantic crossing and were married February 7th, 1931. Intent on retaining her independence, she referred to the marriage as a partnership with dual control. And this is probably where a lot of things I've seen posts of like, she was queer, she was a lesbian, she didn't really like men. She could still like men and just wanted to be independent.
You married a man and y'all are equal partners.
Exactly. Yeah. And I still like women at the same time.
You're equal partners.
Doesn't make a good difference.
Yeah.
So together, from then on, they worked on secret plans for Earhart to become the first woman and the second person to fly solo across the Atlantic. On May 20th, 1932, 5 years to the day after Charles Lindbergh, who was the first to fly across the Atlantic, she took off from Harbor Grace, Newfoundland, to Paris. Strong north winds, icy conditions, and mechanical problems plagued the flight and forced her to land in a pasture near Londonderry Island, Ireland. After scaring most of the cows in the neighborhood, she said, she pulled up into a farmer's backyard. As word of her flight spread, the media surrounded her, both overseas and the U.S. President Hoover presented Earhart with a gold medal from the National Geographic Society, and Congress awarded her with the Distinguished Flying Cross, the first ever given to a woman. At this ceremony, Vice President Charles Curtis praised her courage, saying she displayed heroic courage and skill as a navigator at the risk of her life. Earhart felt the flight proved that men and women are equal in jobs requiring intelligence, coordination, speed, coolness, and willpower. So big steps, big steps. And she continued to make other records in the years followed, setting an altitude record of about 18,450 feet that stood for years. And then early in 1935, she became the first person to fly solo across the Pacific from Honolulu to Oakland, California. Chilled during the 2,400-mile flight, she unpacked a thermos of hot chocolate, and it was, according to her, the most interesting cup of chocolate she's ever had. Sitting up 8,000 feet over the middle of the Pacific. It'd be a pretty interesting cup of hot chocolate, though, I'd say, for sure. And then later on, she was the first to solo Mexico City to Newark. Newark. A large crowd overflowed the field and rushed her plane. So they kind of took her, and then the policeman grabbed her and took her out of the plane. The arm holder started to go one way, while the guy who took her leg went the other way.
I feel like I've seen...
And she was happy to be back on the ground.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen pictures or something of this. Maybe I'm imagining it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's pictures out there.
Yeah.
All sorts of crazy things she's done. Just definitely pushing the limits, not even just the first woman, but as the first person. And she's still pushing harder. Because as she neared her 40th birthday, she was ready for a monumental and final challenge. She wanted to be the first woman to fly around the world. And despite a botched attempt in March that severely damaged her plane, she was still determined to rebuild her twin-engine Lockheed Electra. And so her navigator, Fred Noonan, and herself on June 1st departed from Miami and began the 29,000-mile journey. By June 29th, when they had landed in Lae, New Guinea, all about 7,000 miles had been completed. Frequently inaccurate maps had made navigation difficult for Noonan, and their next hop to Howland Island was by far the most challenging, located 2,556 miles from Lae in the mid-Pacific. And the island is 1.5 miles long and half a mile wide. So a very small landing pad, and not really, I don't know how big her plane was, but that's not quite a good place to land.
I mean, no.
And with this, every unessential item was removed from the plane to make room for additional fuel, which gave Earhart approximately an extra 274 miles. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca, I believe is what that cutter was called. It's ITASCA. It's all just capitalized letters.
Sure.
Was their radio contact just offshore the Howland Island. So, like, there was people there, they were talking with them. They had this one specific Coast Guard ship as their main, hey, let's go, we know where you are. And there's 2 other U.S. ships ordered to burn every light on board, and they were positioned along the flight route as markers. So she had a lot of backing in the process.
Yeah.
On July 2nd at 10 a.m. local time, 0 Greenwich time, the pair took off. Despite ideal weather reports, they flew into overcast skies and intermittent rain showers. This made Noonan's favored method of tracking celestial navigation difficult. As dawn neared, Earhart called the Itasca, reporting cloudy weather, cloudy. In later transmissions, Earhart asked the Itasca to take bearings on her. The Itasca sent her a steady stream of transmissions, but she could not hear them. Her radio transmissions, irregular through most of the night, were faint or interrupted with static. At 7:42 a.m., the Itasca picked up the message. We must be on you, but we cannot see you. Fuel is running low, but unable to reach you by radio. We are flying at 1,000 feet. The ship tried to reply, but the plane seemed not to hear. At 8:45 a.m., Earhart reported, we are running north and south. Nothing further was heard from her. So a rescue attempt immediately commenced and became the most expensive air and sea search in naval history.
Still?
On July 19th, after spending, they spent $4 million in the late 1930s.
Well, that's going to be like $1 trillion now.
So, I don't want to think about it. And after scouring 250,000 square miles of ocean, they officially called off the operation. So let's see, July 19th, they landed July 2nd. It was over 2 weeks long. And so in 1938, a lighthouse was constructed on Howland Island in her memory. And across the U.S., there are streets, schools, and airports named after Earhart. Her birthplace, Atchison, Kansas, became a virtual shrine in her memory. Amelia Earhart rewards and scholarships are given out every year. And a nice little disclaimer at this article that I have is, despite many theories, though, no proof of Earhart fate exists. There is no doubt, however, that the world will always remember Amelia Earhart for her courage, vision, and groundbreaking achievements both in aviation and for women.
Yeah.
Women, that's the common knowledge that's from the 1930s of Amelia Earhart. And so we talked about a lot of her achievements in there, and I can go back and touch a few more others of being president of different societies and such. But I want to go on to her found a plane claim.
Yeah.
So let's see, when was this article written? I'd have to click on the link, but I believe it was 2023 this was found. Oh, this is just a claim. There's no confirmation that this was found, and this is the most recent information. The bones claim is actually older. But I'm going to go to her plane first, because that's the new exciting part.
Of course.
So she disappeared, 87 odd years ago, remaining one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. There's countless theories for her, but the Deep Sea Vision, a Charleston, South Carolina-based team, said that they had captured a sonar image in the Pacific Ocean that appears to have been Earhart's Lockheed 10E Electra aircraft. The company says it scanned over 5,200 square miles of the ocean floor starting in September. So I'm going with this is probably still back in 2023, and because it hasn't happened yet in 2024
Yeah.
or it happened in 2022. And they posted sonar images on social media that appear to show a plane-shaped object resting at the bottom of the sea. A 16-member team, which used a state-of-the-art underwater drone, released a new video of the expedition Monday evening, showing the team reviewed images taken by a submersible. And after an extensive deep-water search, a talented group of underwater archaeologists and words are hard.
Yes, they are.
And marine robotics experts have unveiled a sonar image that may answer the greatest modern mystery of the disappearance of Amelia Earhart.
Well, I'm just going, they're from Charleston. So they just said, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, they are from Charleston.
I mean,
yeah,
I want to see the other side of the country.
There's lots of other
ocean and...
Yeah, there's theories that, they crashed and they were eaten by crabs and things as well. There's all wild stuff. And some of the wild things is there's some information here of other people having picked up some sonar. So multiple deep sea searches using high-tech equipment have tried and failed over the years to find Earhart's plane. But
aliens? She can't just simply vanish. It's not magic.
Rick Gillespie, who has researched Earhart's doomed flight for decades, told CBS in 2018 that he had proof Earhart crash-landed on Gardner Island, about 350 nautical miles from Howland Island, where she was supposed to be, and that she had called for help for nearly a week before her plane was swept out to sea. So this one, he has a little bit more evidence that's presented in this article. He says the calls just weren't heard by the Navy, but also by dozens of people who unexpectedly picked up Earhart's transmissions on their radios thousands of miles away. Reports of people hearing calls for help were documented in places like Florida, Iowa, and Texas. One woman in Canada reported hearing a voice saying, "We have taken in water. We can't hold on much longer." But still, nearly 90 years later, no wreckage has been found. Romeo thinks his team's sonar image may finally show the long-lost aircraft. So that's all the recent theories and possible data of her plane. Now, there's also a bones claim that is a bit older.
Is that the one
Is
that the one where they were prisoners of war?
No, I don't think this one. This one, I think this one does not mention them being prisoners of war.
I swear there's one where they're prisoners.
I'm sure there is. But this is a new forensic analysis indicates that bones were found on a remote South Pacific island in 1940, and that those were very likely those of legendary American aviator Amelia Earhart, according to a researcher at the University of Tennessee. A statement released by the university says the analysis shows that the bones have more similarity to Earhart than to 99% of individuals in a large reference sample. The university says in 1940, physician D.W. Hoodless conducted 7 measurements on human remains and concluded that they belonged to a man. The bones discovered by a British expedition on the island of, I'm not going to say this right, Nikomoraru, were later disregarded. So if those claims were hers, they were discarded. Yep. Amelia Earhart has simply been physically lost in one way or another. And so, but regardless of this, the University of Tennessee anthropology professor Richard Jantz was using modern quantitative techniques and re-examined the bone measurements. So he used a computer program he co-created that estimates gender, ancestry, and stature from skeletal remains. So They at least have the data.
Yeah.
They just don't have her
Okay,
bones.
so they have the data that they
and
can
he
go back
obtained
and look
precise measurements of Earhart's EG. And so he was able to take measurements of her humerus and radius lengths from her photograph, as well as measurements of her clothing. And he concluded that until defendant evidence is presented that the remains are not those of Amelia Earhart, the most convincing argument is that they are hers. It's very likely that her plane has been found, possibly, or some other plane remains, because there was a lot of small aviation planes,
Yeah.
and especially in some places wide and specific, it's still likely it could be somewhere else. The crazy theory of her being landing on a different island and still having radio access somewhere else, and then the possible loss of her bones just being discarded.
Well, I mean, I guess stranger
And
things have been
yeah,
lost.
regardless of all the recent information and theories, Amelia Earhart, is still well known as a very big, influential woman pilot and doing amazing achievements in her lifetime. One of my favorite quotes by her, wrong document. Let's see, let's find it. Scroll up. Did I miss quotes? There it is. So, yeah, I've already said it, but it's still impactful regardless. And women must try to do things as men have tried. When they fail, their failure must be put but a challenge to others.
She did amazing things. I mean, not just for women, but for like aviation. That right? Is that word right?
Yeah,
Yes.
she pushed aviation hard, knowing some of the limits of those planes.
Terrifying. Think that, I mean,
Just a tad.
yeah. I mean, planes nowadays scare me. I can't imagine being in a plane back then when flying is still relatively new. One. Also,
Yep.
structural mechanics and everything. Odd as, I mean, not saying that what we use now necessarily is more stable when it comes to all things structural.
It is way more stable now. We know a lot more about aerodynamics.
I mean, I'm going to take your word for that. I don't know a lot about flying things, but that would be your specialty.
Yeah, well, that is in fact my specialty. I did get a degree in aerospace engineering.
Yes, you did. And you know how things fly and how they stay flying and how to make them. I don't understand your job. There's math.
We can talk more about my job off the podcast. But yeah, I think that rounds out everything we have to say for episode 1, this pilot.
And with that, I guess we say goodbye and go do something extraordinary.